So here I was, little 5-year-old kid, had never played, 5, 6, whatever I was back then, had never played anything but an Atari. You sit a little kid like me down in front of an NES for the first time, hot new system, barely anybody had any experience playing it, and a lot of people were still playing Atari because there was tons of 2600 stuff out there left over from the video game crash, and Nintendo was expensive in the 80s. So if you had, it depended on how much money your family had, whether you were still playing Atari or not. That's why my first console was the ill-fated 7800. Not because the 7800 was amazing, but because you could play 2600 games on it. So here's what I did. Very first time I played Super Mario Brothers without 100 less seconds on the timer. Little 5-year-old kid had no idea what a jump button was. That's not how you play, Jay. I don't know. I do well in Pac-Man. See, I'm holding the button down. Where's the joystick? No. That's not how it goes. Come on, kid. Give me the controller. I'm going to get this, I swear. Bada bing. And today, I have all kinds of problems with Mario 64 because I'm rusty at it. So that's how it all started for me. So, serious this time. How much has changed in all these decades? I love this Hyperkin controller, though. It really does feel like an upgraded NES controller. One of the issues I have with NES controllers these days is... Oops. Oh yeah, I first got to that and I was like, hey, how come that mushroom didn't make me big? Hold on, where's my Sherpa? I gotta adjust my settings again. Microphone a little higher, and then turn down the masters on the monitor. Yeah, streaming noob. Oh man. Yeah, so the problem I have with using older controllers nowadays is plastic has chemical issues over the years. Anybody with a yellowed Super Nintendo can tell you that. So, as much as it'd be fun to find old NES controllers and whatnot, and I'm sure the NES Classic one is probably the best one for me to be using. Hold on, we gotta put OBS back on the screen now. Stop stalling and play the game. There. As much fun as it would be to find an old... I think the NES Classic controller, because it's an official one, is probably my best bet, but... Oh yeah, here we go, this is more... But if you use an original NES controller, who knows, maybe the rubber might have hardened a bit or something. It may not be the way you remember it, especially if you last played this stuff like 30 years ago or whatever it is. So, yeah, well, here's the thing. Super Mario Bros. 2 is actually my favorite game versus this, because they were both out at the same time by the time I got my NES. So I wanted the Mario game where you could play as more than just Mario, and... see here. You could play as more than just Mario and there was no timer. So back then I was goofing around in the stages. Actually, in the pyramid levels in World 6. Another thing I learned over that sitter's house watching someone else play. I also learned what a warp zone was too. But you know what? Let's do a full nostalgia tour with no warp zones for this thing. I don't really have much nostalgia of this game. It was never one of my favorites. As much as the Angry Video Game Nerd generation... Wow.
Epic fail.
Well, if we're gonna be that pathetic... 400 points! Can't do too many of those in a game with a timer. As much as the Angry Video Game Nerd generation taught an entire generation of folks on YouTube to dislike all the 2s, Castlevania 2, Mario 2, Zelda 2, or whatever. As much as that whole thing happened back in the 2000s, I actually liked some of the 2 games better than the 1 games. And lest we forget, nobody had any idea of knowing that those radically different 2 games weren't going to be the standard back then. Let's see, okay. Let's see here. Wow! Forgetting 8-bit physics now? Come on! You can only blame the controller so much. The thing is, though, this is the 8-bit version of this. I actually have Mario All-Stars, and the fact that you can use continues in that game was always... I always preferred that over the 8-bit version. I think there is some kind of cheat code that you can use as a continue code in here, though. I'm not gonna go that crazy, though. Good old nostalgia tour. I would do much better in Mario 2, though. I have way more... Mario 3 as well. I have way more of a background in those two games than this one. See, the problem with the original Mario Brothers for me, or this game, Super, excuse me, as opposed to Mario Brothers, the Atari game, Atari era game, I should say. The problem with Mario 1 is that 2 was always out there, 3 was always out there, and eventually this became the game that that myself and the sitters had if they didn't have Mario 2 and 3. Wow. You know, I think the problem is I'm just not concentrating on this. This must be what some people talk about when they say some games are better for streaming, like RPGs and slower games where you're not doing that. Wow, that's pitiful. I should change the category to just retro and flip the games around. We can open the... Yes, we can. Good. Just change the category to retro. That way we can flip through a bunch of stuff, which is more in line with the way I used to play these games back in the day, especially action-adventure. By the time Mario 64 was out, and of course I beat the game very quickly, so back in the day, got used to the controls when I rented it, and then I blasted through it when I got it for real. But my dad was like, hey, you know, maybe you're just too old for these games, or these kiddie games, as he called them. But that's when I had a sitter at the time who introduced me to RPGs, where you could play the same game for weeks on end. That was the kind of content difference that I was looking for. So I caught some of the better games in the 90s JRPG era. So, let's see. The Elgato box is in green. The Yeti Nano should be compressed into yellow range. Hopefully this isn't too soft. Ah, we only have one life left anyways. Let's have some fun with this. I also used to play around with the Game Genie, too. So, put on moon gravity and stuff and have Mario jump over half the stage. Use an invincibility cheat and just go around fireballing everything. Oops. Nice to see there was some challenge in some games back in the day instead of, here's a tutorial, we're going to tell you how to do the entire thing. And also, oops. Let's go up in the air. Come to think of it, I never actually did play this game all the way through on a lot of the time. I would just use warp zones. Another thing I have to get used to is using a D-pad again, specifically the NES one. So, the way you used to wiggle your thumb and stuff back in the day. Let's see here. Yeah, some things don't change. I usually could only get 2 out of 3 of these. Yup! Some things never change, man. Let's see, wait for that guy to go away. Boink! What? Oh, okay. See, modern televisions have a bit of a latency thing. You don't put them in gaming mode. There, that's more like it. The 5,000 I used to get on a regular basis. Change category while we're waiting. Let's see here. Retro. There is no retro category. Huh. I thought I saw someone using it earlier. He must have manually typed it in. Ah, yes, the water levels. I used to just do this all the time until one of the fish came up really high, or one of the bloopers, the squids, came up really high, and it was all over. There actually was... remember there was a Game Genie code that basically gave you a Bowser level underwater, and you swam over Bowser and you actually could beat the thing, and then the game would glitch out afterwards. Oh yeah, this is pure muscle memory now. The controller feels similar enough that can just kick in, except for the bulges on the bottom to be more ergonomic. Kind of a little bit of a Super Nintendo in this NES controller. Oh, not bad. Do I still only have 1 life? Yeah, going this far with just 1 life. Never had this much luck as a kid. Now watch, I'll get hit by one of the flying fish, as I used to call them. Then again, these games always had weird names for rather mundane... Ooh, another one up. Woohoo! These games usually did have rather bizarre names for mundane-looking characters. Zelda in particular. Let's see here. Why on earth would they call a bouncing rabbit thing a Pole's voice? And other stuff like that. Then there was the animated cartoons. Talk about cheeseball. All the stupid stuff. And, hey, we got a meme out of it. Excuse me, princess. So we're up to a grand total of 2 lives. Oh boy. But just like back in the day, getting a little bored here because I've played this so much, and it shows. Yeah, this was never a game I liked a lot. I think it was spoiled by Super Mario Bros. 2 being out by the time I was getting my Nintendo. The Mario 2 box and everything had a more colorful... it was big and blue and stuff. You had the Mario Madness thing going on. And being able to play as more characters. Don't jump. Let's see here. I don't think I ever ran under him. Now I did. The other part of this is that many of these games were designed to resemble arcade games, so it was your score that mattered, not so much whether you could go all the way through and rescue the princess. The first time I went through and beat this game all the way, and 8-3 was a pain in the neck, let me tell you. There you go. The first time I went through and played this game all the way, it did feel like an accomplishment, though. And what, was it up and A that gave you the... something? No, it wasn't.